very, so for everybody who didn't hear it, Marcia has listened to the interview that Desiree did with the author. And I listened to it as well, and it's really good. And she seems like such a nice woman. She seems so sympathetic. I really enjoyed her. And yeah, she's just somebody whom I want to read more from. So short stories is good too.
Yeah, well, it helped me understand the short stories, and it might be an option for next year book club.
Definitely. Because, you know, the last book, Jonas Eika, that is short stories. They're kind of interconnect, three of them, but it's short stories. Yeah. So it's always a different matter, because when you pick short stories for a book club, you kind of have to say, we're focusing on this one. You can't say we're focusing on all 10. So that's the problem. But we have to say, okay, one or two that are the main ones. So that would be it. Hi, Desiree. You are just, Desiree, you're just being lauded for your great interview of the author.
Thank you. Did anyone have a chance to watch it? I had so much fun. That was like, I had so much fun interviewing her. It was such a great experience. I hope you guys enjoyed it, those of you who've had a chance to maybe watch it.
Yeah, it was
Marcia,
great.
About that. Yeah, and I saw it too, and I thought it was great. She seems like a really nice person, Desiree.
Yeah, she was, and she was. I love that. Like, she comes from Jutland, right? So, and that, I think that comes through in the way she's talking and thinking, and like she has this like special way of having a very toned down sort of humor with a little sarcasm in it. And I spent a few years in Jutland, and I recognize it, and I had a lot of fun with her. She was super smart and very well spoken, and just like so graceful with her time, and I just loved it. It was great.
Well, speaking as a woman from Jutland, and Christine is a woman from Jutland, we definitely know what it's like to be from Jutland, which is the mainland. And of course, one of the famous authors from Denmark, Ebbe Åkjær, he wrote a song about Jylland, Jutland. And I'm very proud of that, because it's a great song too. So unless you don't know that there has always been a competition between Jutland and the rest, the islands. So when I played tennis, believe it or not, we had competitions that were called the provincial championships, where the people from Jutland were playing against the people from Copenhagen. And boy, did we want to beat them every time. So that is regionalism in its, okay, that is in the past. I'm sure everybody's very friendly now. Let's get started. This is the book in Danish. Thank you so much to all of you for showing up. Thank you for being here and sharing your time. Thank you, of course, to Lena, who's representing Northwest Danish Association, and to Mary Delorme, who started this via Scan Design. We are today talking about, as I said in my questions, a book that is very similar in a strange way to The Liar that we talked about last time. That was about existential alienation, finding your home, finding your existence, finding your identity. And today it is moved forward, because the other one was from 1955, and here we are in 2017. But I wanted to read those two books following each other, because I think that they have similar themes. I send out questions. As you know, they are just meant as inspiration, not anything for you to respond to. And as usual, when Desiree has done her interview, I don't want to do a PowerPoint and introduce the author, because there's absolutely no reason to do that when we have the interview with Desiree. So let me just jump right in and say that I would like to start with a quote that might lead to discussion. I hope so. It's one of the things that I find very interesting in this book, coming from Jutland, of course. She says, and this is the third one, I'm not going to start with that. She says, "The place that you came from, you can never return to. It has changed and you're a stranger. And she doesn't say that only once. This was in the Danish version, page 67. She says it again, and she says, but the place that you come from, you cannot return to. It is no longer there, and you have become a stranger yourself, Sonia thinks and swallows. So that's on page 157. Those, I think, are really exciting, very, very interesting, and also very relevant quotes. And of course, that is related to page 47 in this book, the end of chapter 5, where she says, I can't shift gears. So I don't know if anybody wants to start out talking about this notion of returning. Is that something that is relatable to you? Does she make it relatable? How do you feel about not being able to return to the place you came from? Has it changed? Have you changed? Or can we always just go back?
I really identified with her. I mean, I went through that myself pretty much. I'm Norwegian background, first to college, first one in the family, and I've tried numerous times. I'm 81 now, and I finally have realized you cannot go back. You're totally separate, you know, and you're a stranger to them and a stranger to yourself too, you know. So I really love the book.
Did you want to go back, Karen?
I tried because I couldn't understand why they didn't accept me, you know, but they had all these cues and I went beyond. I had friends that weren't family. I went to college, I traveled, and you don't do that. You want security, you know, like her sister. It's all set for life.
Mm-hmm. Did any of you look up where she came from? Belling?
Yes, I did. And it's a dot on the map. It's a dot on the map. They don't even have Google pictures of the place. So it must be rural.
Very. And it's Western Jutland, which is about as rural as it gets, right? It's the rotten banana. If you want to do the really negative thing, that's what that part of Denmark that kind of comprises the West Jutland, where she comes from, is the rotten banana. That's right.
Yeah, and what she says is also, I think she says it in the interview as well, but one of the reasons why she didn't return when she went back to Jutland, she didn't return to her place of origin, but because she knew she couldn't do it. But what it also touches on, I think, is coming to terms with both within yourself, but also when you've experienced living in different places, that sense of alienation and loneliness within yourself, that for many of us, that's a condition that we have to somehow come to terms with. So it's pretty obvious that we change, the places we come from change, but that change affects us within. And I think that really resonated with me, that, you know, that sense of always feeling like just a little out of place, and that you have this deep loneliness within you, and maybe that's okay. Maybe that's part of the life we chose, or that chose us. I don't know.
I find that I could not go back either, and I think it's because I regularly attend family reunions and high school class reunions, and even though I enjoy them, that just doesn't seem to fit me. That my home doesn't seem to fit me. Maybe it will in 5 years when I'm 80 or whatever, but I understood very well what she was saying.
Right. And I don't think you don't necessarily have to be an immigrant and leave your country. I mean, she didn't leave her country, but she went from the country to the city, which is a kind of immigration, especially in Denmark. Having family in both Sjælland and Jylland, I understand the stress between those two groups of people. But I remember feeling just as I got older that I can't go home again, even though I can walk to where I grew up. Because I think as we change and grow, that part that we remember, we can't go back to, because everybody has changed and grown. And even if you're that close to where you grew up. So I remember talking a lot about this theme in college when we discussed, I think, Thomas Wolfe, when his you can't go home again. And at that point, I didn't understand that very well, but I do think aging is part of that, not being able to go back.
That's interesting. Yes, Laura?
So oddly enough, I grew up in Appleton, Wisconsin. And I feel, now I live in Los Angeles, California, which is the diametric opposite of Appleton, Wisconsin. And I feel like time has frozen every time I go back to visit my parents who still live there. And I definitely related to Sonia and her sister, because my sister still lives in Madison. And we are also diametrically opposite. So I feel like I have outgrown whatever Appleton was so kind to offer me as I was growing up. I feel like I've inherited the excellent work ethic and everything that goes along with growing up in the Midwest. But I feel like every time I go back there, people do look at me like I'm an alien. It's very strange. I've never experienced anything like that in my life. I thought I could go back and everything felt the same except completely different. Only I was the one that was different.
I went to college in Appleton.
Oh, did you go to Lawrence?
Yeah.
Of course. It's
And
so
I went
beautiful. It's so beautiful.
I mean, Houdini, yes, museum,
Yes.
Appleton, that's
Of course.
And McCarthy.
He's buried there, yes.
Laura, I don't know, can you all, when you say this, and it seems like everybody's saying, oh, we can't go back, does that relate to two things that I find in the book very interesting? Her trips into that cornfield and the language, her lack of communication ability with the sister, all those letters she writes, the postcards she writes, is that it? Do we lose the language of where we came from? Do we lose that ability to get lost in the cornfield, or what? Why does she do that? You know, what is she finding when she's sitting out there? I could even go to that tree at the end too. Do you think that it's connected, this feeling of alienation is connected to something special that you experienced? And is it more to do with getting older? Because I think that's an interesting aspect that she's not talking about, except, okay, she's 42. She doesn't have a love life. I mean, that's another question to discuss. But do you think it's connected to place or people or language, or what is that feeling coming from?
I kind of feel like it's an amalgamation of all three, because I think as you get older, I'm 42, I think 43. I don't know. Pandemic has ruined my time space continuum for how old I actually am. But just as I've gotten older and I've been all over the world. I've been so lucky to be in Denmark. I've been all over Europe. I've been all over Africa. And I feel like all of those different experiences inform how you interact with the world itself. And I feel like I don't speak the same language, even though we both speak English in Wisconsin. It just feels like a different level of ability to connect with people. And I felt like the cornfield, to me, felt like a safe place where I could just go and lose myself and feel a sense of acceptance, because I'm the only voice that I'm hearing in my own head.
Laura, you don't speak like you came from Wisconsin either.
I know, I've lost it. I lived in Atlanta for 15 years, so I kind of have that newscaster affect where it's kind of canceled out with Southern and Midwestern. So now I just sound like a news broadcaster when I speak. But when I go home, I definitely say Minnesota, definitely. Yeah.
Good.
It reminds me of I find, how many people grew up on a farm here?
Oh, I did. Yes.
Okay, well, if you grew up on a farm, at our age, it was a completely different time, because we did things like climb the apple trees and pretend. And we did walk in the fields. And when we were young, my dad paid us a penny for every weed, mustard weed, we pulled out of the field. I could relate to so many things she experienced. And I find myself still enjoying. I live, on an acreage, and I love it. I love not having people right next to me. I love taking a cup of coffee down to my little woods, and instead at home we light a fire and try and cook eggs without our parents knowing, and I'm sure they did. But I love taking a cup of coffee into my woods here. But I have no desire to go back to my little hometown and do it there. But I can just understand the peace you feel. And I thought that she enjoys walking in the cemetery or sitting in the cemetery and reading in the cemetery. That's not unusual. To me, that's quite European. I could understand her behavior and where it came from when she came into the city. I'm not sure she was a fit for the city.
No, it seems like a mistake, doesn't it, Linda?
Yeah, I think that there's something very primal within all of us that, well, maybe not all of us, but when you get to nature, whether it's a rye field or the quiet of a cemetery, that you're communing with that, or you're, expressing yourself, writing a poem or reading a book. It just feels that it's more real when you're doing something like that. So I understood totally the feeling that she had being in her rye field. Now, I come from a place in rural South Jersey called Vineland. And many years later, I actually accepted a teaching position at a college there. And so I went back for 7 years. And I did a lot of the things that I did when I was young, but a lot had changed. The river that I used to float down on an inner tube and just slurp the water, it was now like a sewage treatment kind of river. Things had gotten so much worse in that area with nature that it was just shocking. And but still, one time when I was driving to the college, a cow came out and chased my car down the road. So some things didn't change.
And what about, like Laura is saying, the language? I mean, I find that when I go back to Denmark in the summer, which I've been doing for all the years I've been here, for a long summer, that there are lots of new expressions and words that have become popular, the fads, right? And you have to kind of pick up on them and hear what people say. And every year in Denmark, it's becoming more and more anglicized. That's not her problem. What do you see as her problem in communicating or not communicating with her sister? What has happened between her and her sister?
She's become more and more isolated from her sister, and her sister's playing the same game, because when she speaks to her at one point, the sister's pretending that she's at a gardening center where really she's at home. And then she's writing this letter as a connective tissue towards her sister, and yet she doesn't mail it, and she's going to send a postcard, yet she tears it up.
So what do you see? How do you see her communication with the family? And it's then she talks to her brother-in-law. It's totally, not any kind of profound conversations. What is happening to her? What does Sonia, and notice the name, Sonia is also a very basic Danish old name. There's nothing fancy about being a Sonia. How is she positioning herself in language and in her existence via her language? Did anybody think about that? She communicates with such a small number of people. She has Molly, who is not called Molly, but who is called Lone, another very basic name. Molly is a little bit more fancy, right? And then she has Ellen, the massage therapist. And then she has, Folge and Jytte. And that's basically whom we hear about. Why is she so isolated? What has happened to her? And how is that reflected in her language? Did any of you kind of feel, I can relate to that, and I know what's going on in her life?
Well, she has kind of a solitary job as a translator. I'm sure she probably just works at home,
Sandra, that was exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking she
Oh,
can't,
I'm sorry.
can't talk.
Yeah.
She can only translate.
Yeah.
She cannot translate that relationship to her sister into a viable communication. So translation becomes that extra layer on top of our communication, right? Where you think about the movie Lost in Translation. I mean, and just the expression lost in translation. And what is it she's losing? Maybe her existence. I don't know. Laura, sorry.
I totally agree with Sandra. I was thinking the same thing, that the fact that she has this solitary, isolated job where she's translating somebody else's words verbatim, almost verbatim, and she has this dictionary that she can use to find what she needs. She doesn't have that dictionary in her real day-to-day existence in order to say what she needs to say. And I also kind of got the feeling that she was very unsure of who she was. She was kind of trying on these different, I would say, shoes in her world, not literal shoes, but just sort of metaphorical shoes, as should I live in the country? Should I live in the city? My sister has this, what appears to be an idyllic life, and I'm just in the city alone by myself, and all I have is my words that I'm translating for somebody else. And I'm only translating somebody else's voice. And she doesn't really have a voice that she feels comfortable communicating with anybody in her life, except on a very basic level.
And can I just add to what you're saying? She hates his words.
Yes.
She hates the descriptions of this author, blood and meat. And remember that day where she had to drink so much coffee because she couldn't get through it. So she's also chosen something that she absolutely hates doing. Instead of having translations of books that make her feel, like a happy little butterfly, she is wallowing in murder. And she says there's just murders everywhere in Sweden, and she never realized that, which is, just part of the humor of Dorthe Norse. Okay, all these bodies that are in ditches. It's very funny. Of course, kind of dark humor. Desiree.
Yeah, she hates it, and just like everything else, she still does it because she doesn't have that sense of self. It's her language, not her internal language, but her external language is so. I mean, if we think about some of the postcards she tears up, it's so infantile. Like she's trying to reach back to a time where maybe they did have a language. And then it comes across because, again, you cannot go back to who you were. She's not a kid anymore. She cannot reach her through the means she was able to maybe when they were kids. And it's just another layer to that, like complete, utter being lost and not even being comfortable in the language that maybe at some point was able to bridge them, I think.
I'm not sure she ever had very good communication skills, even as a child. And in some respects, she almost seems slightly on the spectrum when it comes to communicating and thinking things through and reacting to situations.
Yeah, but maybe is that because we're not used to people being as shy as she is? She's very shy, very insecure, and we are expecting everybody in the US especially to be a little bit more self-assured and self-confident. I don't know. I didn't see her as that, Cynthia. That's interesting that you say that. I saw her as just a pretty shy woman. And like I was trying to point out in my questions, Danes are known for their directness. That was the one thing I had to tone down a lot when I came here. People would say to me, "Oh, you want to tell me what you really think?" And I thought, what do they mean? Yeah, I'm trying to tell you what I think. And of course, it took me a little bit of, that split second to, okay, tone it down, use the American euphemisms. That's not what Danes are famous for, right? They are famous for just saying what they think. And she's not able to be confrontational. Have you thought about why is that? Why is she such, she's like a little fetus who's afraid. She's did you ever learn how to drive? Did you have a driving instructor like she has you do, who talks nonstop and switches her gears? I mean, wouldn't you just be so annoyed that you'd actually say something? Gosh, it takes her a long time.
Right. But how many people did it take 6 months to even learn how to shift the gears?
Well, I will say I had 56 driving lessons. Just so I really related with this book. I was like, I had to change teachers at the end because the first one wanted to kiss me every time I did a parking ride. So that didn't help with the 56 lessons. It was so relatable, that thing. But the thing is, when she starts standing up for herself, even if it's just like tiny little bits, and that's its secret sauce, at least it's been in my life, that, you know, it's so uncomfortable when people do things that we don't really like, or they step over our boundaries, and we try to, in so many ways, to save their face. And then when we finally stand up like she does and puts her foot down, things lift, things change, and she can start figuring out her place in life. And maybe she'll get her driver's license just like I did after 56 lessons.
When you talk about how shy she was and, you know, kind of let people walk all over her, and yet her mother consistently apparently called her a fighter. So I was kind of wondering how she's seeing herself, which is all we're seeing, and how other people at some point might have seen her, are not exactly on the same plane. Because why would a mother who had a child that shy, that to be telling her that she's a fighter? I don't think it was said to make her be a fighter, because her mother liked the kind of person she was. So she must have seen her as one. But did anybody else find that kind of unusual?
Well, when I thought about her parents, who are still alive, and we never have an interaction with them in the book, do we?
No.
And they were so important to her. I mean, she talks about her father patting her on the head, snuggling up to her mother. That relationship isn't there now.
Remember, Cynthia, what she says about using words. Okay, so you can't say you love somebody. You know, that the whole American love you thing is seen by dames as incredibly superficial. I'm generalizing as usual, but like she said, out west, you said, yeah, I'm kind of fond of you. And that's as much as you can show in the way of emotions. So I think she's also stuck in that, maybe stuck a little bit in that. And if you think about, okay, can I just squeeze in the liar here? That was his problem too. He couldn't express his emotions, and she's unable to. She writes to her mom, you know, I really, really appreciate you. I really am very fond of you. But she doesn't write, I love you dearly. So she cannot get out of that cage of, you don't express your emotions as, you know, hyperbole. In Denmark, you do litotes. You just say, okay, not so bad. And I don't really mind you. So I think she's also caught in that. But I wanted to ask you, oh, I'm sorry.
I just, you know, I thought that she was a much more complicated person than her family. I mean, Kate, everything was in order, whereas she had all these things to consider. And myself too, I've got all these, I don't just come out, this is the way it is. There's one true way. Whereas her sister knew. And how can you communicate when, you know, you don't know what's the right thing? And so I really empathize with her hesitancy to think that, boy, I know what's going on, because there were many options. But with Kate, no options.
Yeah. And that's what I wanted to ask. How do you see her relationship with Molly? It's totally related to what you said. How is her interaction?
There, again, I think she was insecure, but in the end, she walked away. I was so proud of her.
I was surprised they could remain.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think
I
she
mean-
wanted everyone to love her, but Molly, there's a limit.
Yeah, and yet she never would have been in Copenhagen without Molly.
That's
No.
right. That's true. That's true.
but is Molly a friend?
Probably
You
not
see-
my kind of friend.
What's your kind of friend, Cynthia?
Well, I think, you know, part of growing and aging and being educated brings you different kinds of relationships.
Mhm.
And I don't have a feeling that our Sonia made that leap. Molly, I think, did. And, you know, while we may not agree with some of Molly's choices, well, she also sort of used Sonia. But
Yes.
I would totally agree that Sonia is a very complicated person. And what we also don't know is what is happening in her brain. You know, what with her vertigo, you know, how else does that affect your brain, or how does that affect the way you communicate? By the way, I think Kate was a bit jealous of her and didn't know how to handle it.
Absolutely.
Mhm. Anybody want to
The
respond to
vertigo.
that? You've got your hand up, sorry.
I thought the vertigo was another thing she couldn't control. You know, it was something she couldn't be certain about. She didn't know when, you know, whereas Kate, well, nothing like that would happen to Kate or Molly either, you know, or they just.
It ran in the family, right? I mean, so maybe Kate had it. We just don't know. Hereditary. Have any of you ever had that
Yes.
kind of
Vertigo? Oh my
yeah.
God.
Because this is a disease. I mean, she's quite right about that, and it's horrible. And it is. I haven't tried it, but I have a dear friend who has, and it comes on unexpected, and it is disabling. It's just impossible to do anything, and you can't raise your head, and you can't, you know, get out of bed, basically. So I definitely feel that that is a symbol, but it's also a very physical disease, which may be a symbol of Ellen, what she says, oh, you have to let everything out and let it explode out of your organs, otherwise you'll get cancer. You can decide whether you want to believe that or not. Okay, Laura, sorry, got off on a
No,
side
I was thinking about the vertigo and how she has to be very measured and very careful about everything she does, every little step that she takes, no matter what she does. She always has to think, okay, I have to keep perfect posture, head on straight. I don't want to make any sudden movements to let anybody know that I have this debilitating condition, especially when she's trying to drive. And I just thought about how horrific that would be to have an episode while she's trying to drive, because not only she's putting herself in danger, the driving instructor, she's also not going to get her license. She might end up unconscious and swerving into traffic. And I felt like that kind of was an undertone for everything in the book, for her just having to be so incredibly careful about every single thing she did as to keep that, under wraps for everybody.
Oh, yeah. And learning how to shift gears, right?
Yes.
You can do that with your head straight.
All at the same time.
Go for it. Linda.
Some of the best humor in the book comes out of the fact that she's dealing with vertigo. I mean, I think her comments about, well, let's hope I don't kill anyone this time when I go out, or, a lot of that is, I mean, I thought a lot of it was funny. So I know she was living an existential crisis, but I also found the humor that I haven't ever seen in books with people living an existential crisis. So I don't know if other people found it funny. Maybe something's wrong with me, but I did find that a lot of humor.
Quite hilarious.
Funny lady, yeah.
She is funny. Linda?
Yeah, there's a school of thought. I looked up this disease that says that it's stress related, and in a number of instances in the book, yes, she was hiding from Jutta and crouching down and bent over. A few times when she had this very bad experience, she was under a stressful situation, self-inflicted but stressful nonetheless. And
So you think?
I talking about Molly, I didn't like what Sonia was doing to her. when you take someone to a concert or someone takes you to a concert, you know, no matter how educated you are, whether you're from, you know, Oxford or Harvard or an Ivy League school or Juilliard, I think it's inappropriate to begin to explain Brahms to someone, even if they don't know about it. It's not your place. It's your place as a companion to go, unless they ask, what do you think of Brahms' first movement? What do you think of the cello concerto? Then it's reasonable, but it's not reasonable to pontificate. And I thought it was very refreshing that she then, it saved me from really disliking her a bit. She took such an interest in Martha, and they went off together. And although it might be to Molly that she's been ditched, still I felt that that was a redeeming factor from
Molly was on her iPhone. Molly was
but they were traveling on a train to go to a concert together. Molly blew her off, and then physically Sonia blew her off. But like I said, I felt that Sonia redeemed herself because she went to help Martha.
Yes.
And I thought that was more important than attending any concert.
And tell me, everybody, how did you see the ending? I mean, yeah, we haven't come to the end of our discussion, but we can certainly stick out and look at the ending. Martha, very biblical name.
Very positive ending to me.
What did she stand for? How did you see her?
Martha?
Yes.
She accepted her as she was. You know?
Yes. And what do you think she represents in the book?
I thought she was her chance to go home again. Not
Yeah.
physically, emotionally.
But to go to her home, not her family's home, but her own home, her inside home. She didn't need a fortune teller anymore either. You know, she just...
Yeah, Martha became the conduit for her to leave Copenhagen. She became to me, it really related to the fortune teller. Yeah. Because the main character, some of the main characters, Marie, who she knew as a girl, who was a member of the Indre Mission, the evangelical wing of the Lutheran Church, and then Molly, and then Martha. And when I looked, I figured that fortune teller M, and M is the 13th letter, which is on the tarot card of change. So if she was trying to get us to even think of that this card is transformation, closure, renewal, altered circumstances, that is indeed what the book was about. So I thought it was interesting that she had three main characters with the letter M in it.
Hey. Heidi, you wanted to say something?
Oh, I was completely shocked by the ending. I was reading the book, I was reading it on my computer, and I was on the left side of my computer and I went to the right side and the book ended. I was just shocked. I couldn't believe it. I didn't expect that in the least. And I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why she would suddenly decide she was going to go home or go back to a familiar place and probably not ever have to learn how to drive, because she made some comment about 2 stoplights in the whole town or something. She didn't really have to shift gears. She just needed to drive around to get herself places. And it seemed like she could do that at that point. I was really surprised. I didn't know what to make of it. I'm sorry?
What do you think? Was she failing? Did you see her as a failure at the end? Or, I mean, were you surprised in the sense that you were disappointed in her, or what?
I was. I thought she just gave up. Okay, I give up. I don't belong here. I'm going home. I'm going someplace close to home if she didn't go home. So I was sort of in a quandary about that.
I sort of felt that Martha reminded me of many of my aunts, who are wonderful people. And I couldn't help but think that maybe Sonia finally recognized the kindness that was home that she could go to. Because, you know, I think that one of the kindest people I found in the story was that man with the child who came out of the chess club. I found that a very touching scene. He just took care of her right there. But there wasn't a lot of other kindness that I felt in Copenhagen for her. And he would have.
What about Folge?
Pardon?
What about Folge?
He seemed kind to her.
Yeah.
Didn't you see him as kind?
Yeah,
I did.
You know,
I didn't.
Not yet. I don't know him well enough.
Okay.
And that's not going to be that's not going to be a consistent kindness that you encounter every day that you can, she wasn't, well, I shouldn't say she wasn't honest with him. I think that was very helpful with her in opening up her communication. I think that experience with him, but that's not a lasting friendship or a lasting kindness. Whereas, if Martha, if you can walk a mile to Martha's house, I bet there's more than one Martha in that community who would accept her as well.
And there's only one traffic light.
Right.
One traffic light.
One, yeah. So even better.
Do all cars in Denmark have gears?
Most of them. Now you can also get automatic, but you learn to drive with shifting gears. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's usually not the biggest problem of getting your driver's license. It's kind of like the age.
It's
okay,
the
I get
bikes.
it.
The bikes.
The bikes that you don't want to hit, right? That is where Yuda is yelling at her at some point, and getting into that quarrel and of course being incredibly racist and nasty and yet the bikes, boy, that's something when you drive in Denmark, you have bikes everywhere.
Everywhere.
What can I ask you, because I see Folge as trying to be kind. How did you read, trying to be kind, trying to kind of loosen her up a little bit because he knows she's been traumatized by Yuda, even though he doesn't want to accept it. He knows that that's happened. How do you see him taking her to Sydhavnstippen and showing her the remnants, the trash from Sjælhuset, the house that was bombed, which is, a very traumatic part of Danish history? Because as you read, they did put the resistance movement people on the top floors, and then they had their headquarters, the Gestapo headquarters, on the bottom. And they came and they did the bombing where they had the bombs go down and then horizontal. And of course, in the process, they also bombed the French school and killed many, many children in Copenhagen. So that was the catastrophe. But why? Did you kind of, like Heidi was saying, shocked at the ending, did you all say, what the heck are we doing out here? Looking at this debris from World War II.
Yeah, I have to admit, I didn't understand that part either. Was he trying to establish a connection with her and share something meaningful to him?
I think so.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Yes. And remember when he said that he gets so tired of driving with all these kids?
Yeah.
And, he finally had someone closer to his age and he could share and talk. And I find it interesting that a driver instructor is married to a second wife who's a foot doctor. And if you remember, I think she had more difficulties than just the vertigo. I think there was some information about her legs and her hips and her feet and everything. So, I think part of it was that I agree that he finally had someone to share who might understand, because we don't know how long that had been with him or who in his family might have been affected by that.
Very good point, Cynthia.
I was really surprised by some of these strange kind of comments she made about guys, men, and sex and penises and whatnot. And I seemed like when he started touching her, she kind of froze.
Yeah.
No, I just want you to teach me to drive. I don't want to know you, you know.
It was, and these were random, kind of like grabbing her. It wasn't like he was touching her. He was just, you know, kind of calming her. Yeah. So that is just, she was misreading him, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, I don't know. I don't like to be touched like that by people that I don't know. I mean, that aren't in my close circle.
Right.
You know, there are other ways to teach you how to drive or whatever without touching you.
Yes.
But he did encourage her, and he did allow her to shift.
Mm-hmm.
Which the other woman didn't.
And by touching her hand, he showed her the age figure, right?
Yes.
So he actually taught her. So obviously, for me, that was the catalyst. She needed to be touched in a different way from Elin, who was touching her in order to find her secrets. He was just trying to teach her how the gear is shifting. So I thought that that was an interesting bridge between not wanting to be touched, being touched, and then learning what she wanted to learn, namely shifting gears in her life. Okay, Laura, now it is your turn.
I felt sort of in two minds about him taking her to this very kind of sad and yet sacred place at the same time. I felt like he was trying to share a little bit of something that was very important to him with her, because she was a little bit older than most of his students and maybe she could appreciate what had happened there. But I also felt very nervous for her, like she was being lured there for something untoward to happen. Because she felt very conflicted about being touched, and sort of it felt like a back and forth, like she was sort of comfortable with it, but then other times she was kind of not comfortable with it. So I felt I had very mixed emotions about how that whole thing played out.
And did you think about the fact that that is also very, very typical? Here we are, a lot of women, and we have been taught that, okay, these inappropriate touchings are inappropriate and nobody should touch us, like Cynthia is saying, if we don't know them or we don't feel comfortable about it, and we are on that slippery slope. And when does it become some kind of harassment? We have the Me Too movement. This is very relevant too, because I honestly think that he is just trying to make her feel a little bit more calm and feel like she is not a failure in this learning to drive business, which is also learning to drive through your life. So it's very, very interesting how we can see him as such an ambivalent figure, because one, we have been taught to think in a certain way. Two, we do feel some kind of antagonism in another way. And we are products of the society that we are in, which is, of course, right now exploding in so many ways. That's right.
But he did take her there without telling her where she was going.
Yes.
To me, that is not something you do to someone that you want to calm down. I mean, I'm going to take you to this place where we're kind of basically alone and away from everybody else. I mean, I think there was more to his side of that relationship than love and kindness.
Definitely. And she reacted as if there was, because that's when she had her explosion. Can I just learn how to drive? Yes.
Right.
He also read more into it. That's right.
He is super lonely himself. He has some kind of comment about his own relationship with his wife or something, where things are rarely black and white, right? He might be super innocent, but he might, and he might be very lonely and not put anything sexual into this, but just wanting some intimacy that she's not willing to give him. And then he brings her to this place, like you just said, that where she's like marching off, and he's like, if you want to go, you should go that way, because she doesn't have a sense of direction, like many of us. So he is nice, but he's also super awkward and like, oh, you know that story? Yeah, pretty much everyone knows the story about the French school. So he's he's just super awkward, and he's lonely as well. There is so much loneliness in this book.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you were talking about that, Desiree. That's where he says, well, I don't want to go to work and also be yelled at. So that's where we know that, okay, his relationship is not just pure idyllic bliss, right? So, is there any, yes, Marcia?
This isn't related to the book, but it is. If you haven't seen the movie Bombardment, it's about the bombing of the French school. And I think we just watched it the other night, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is part of the book. I think it's on Amazon Prime. Either Amazon Prime or Netflix. Bombardment.
Bombardment. Okay. We don't have too much time left.
Can I add to that, Nita?
Yes, please.
Just for you who are interested in this and who understand Danish, there was this amazing podcast called Kiggerpigen. And it's about she has a little very anonymous stone on the graveyard, and no one really knew who she was. So this journalist took it upon herself over several years to try and dig into who she was. And then she unfolds her story and at the same time puts it in a historical setting. It is absolutely wonderful podcast. Kiggerpigen.
You want to write it in the chat,
sure,
please?
Yeah, sorry, it's not about this book.
No, I wanted to ask two questions here because we are, of course, always nearing the end. Why did she not want to learn to play from a book? Why did she just want to sit in a tree and play according to her own desires? So that's my one question, right? And the second one is actually the last one I had in my list, namely, what is this book really about? We've had so many themes mentioned today. So why does she not, somebody's mentioned that she might be on the spectrum. Is that why she wants to sit up there in the tree with her butt hanging out of a chair that doesn't have a seat and just play and feel again like one with nature? What is going on? And why doesn't she want to learn to read music and so on? Why doesn't she want to learn to drive and shift gears and feel more secure about herself? What is this book really about?
As I said before, I think it's about transformation. The book's about transformation. And when you sit with a recorder or a guitar and you're just plucking notes randomly, or sitting at a keyboard and without a lesson, just fiddling with it, let's say you're going to get lessons, there is something that the music does. It alters your state of consciousness. You follow the note, and maybe you're musically inclined and you get to another note, and maybe you get to a 1-3-5, and now you're playing a beautiful chord, but you weren't boxed in by the notes. Because sometimes the more you know about something, the more it boxes you in and you lose a sense of freedom with it. That's just my thought and experience with that.
Beautiful. Mm-hmm.
A recorder is a pretty simple musical instrument. It's even part of music programs in most schools. And yes, I can just see what fun it would be to be up in a tree trying to imitate the birds with a recorder. And yes, no one telling you it doesn't sound right, or, wrong fingers or whatever. I thought that was sort of a beautiful musical experience kids had. Just the freedom.
Don't go away. Ingrid, you wanted to say something.
Well, the themes that I'm picking up, it really is alienation in modern life, and that she was always harking back to an earlier, simpler, more direct experience time, not reading, just communing with nature. I don't know if the old days were really like that, but community, and that's what I found.
That goes to a phrase that I heard years and years ago, and I don't know where I ever picked it up, but it goes right to what you were saying, Ingrid, is that nostalgically purified notions of home.
Wonderful. And I want to point out too, that at some point she's saying, Kate, my sister, has now turned into everything she was not when she was young. She is now this secure, married mother and wife and so on. And when she was young, she was the rebel. And I was just a little island all to myself, kind of following in her footsteps. And I wasn't really anything. So that's also interesting that she sees herself as just a nobody and her sister as a somebody. And now her sister seems to be, for us at least, a nobody. And Sonia is coming into herself. Desiree, did you give up?
Well, she's such a free spirit, and she might not be able to put her rich inner life into words. I don't know what's going on in the background, but yeah, but that's, to me, that's what it's about, being a misfit where you are, but then breaking away, even though you are choosing to do things that might not in a broader scale seem very posh or in accordance with what we've all been taught to believe, namely that the urban city life is what we should all aim for. And when you come to terms with who you are and accept that, maybe you can grow from there.
That's beautiful. Did you practice this, Desiree? Because of course, I wanted to end with exactly that comparison between this book and The Liar. Think about it. He accepts his position, his life, his feelings, what he's doing, and where he is, and he makes the best of it. And at the end, I see Sonia doing the same. She's heading home, trying to make the best of it, knowing full well, saying it twice, it's not going to be the same. I'm not going to come back to the same, and I may be a stranger, but she's still going to try. So there's your positive take, just like The Liar, in spite of being kind of like, okay, it's a failure all along, ends on that positive note of self-acceptance.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the note I want to end on. Yes, we have to have something positive to think about in these depressing days of war in Europe. Yeah. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for showing up. And next time it's going to be totally different and a very different reading. So I sincerely hope to see all your happy faces again. And thank you for all your wonderful comments and all your wonderful interpretations. And have a beautiful rest of the week. Here it's spring break, so we're all on break. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Nita.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Tak, Nita.
Selv tak.
Du er en stjerne.